number 1, Paul Mozina.
Woo!
We have Paul Mozina fans here tonight. Paul's wearing flannel, but I told him to wear a pink tuxedo, and he didn't do what I said. Paul is a volunteer at Scuppernong River Wetlands, which is a wetland gems. Our organization has highlighted 100 high-quality wetlands all around the state, and Paul has really been taking care of one of our wetland gems, the Scuppernong River Wetlands area. I first met Paul in the summer of 2012. First summer I was back in Wisconsin. I'd been gone for a couple of decades, moved back, and I don't know how we connected, but anyways, I went out and spent a day with you running around, and I was really impressed. And we went back again. I hadn't been back on your lands until this last summer, 4 years later. And I got to see the progress in those 4-year times. So it was really fun to see what you'd done in that time, and just a little piece of what you'd done in that time. The one thing I'll say about Paul is, the best way I can describe Paul is he's comprehensive, if that makes sense. If you know Paul, maybe you understand what that means. He's also high energy and a lot of other things. But to say a few words about Paul, Lindsay Knutsvig. Lindsay, are you come on up, you're going to say a few words.
Sure.
In honor of Paul.
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to say I'm very grateful to the Wisconsin Wetlands Association for all the relentless effort that they do, ensuring our Wisconsin wetlands are healthy and plentiful. But tonight I'm especially grateful to them for this opportunity to recognize these very deserving award winners, and I'm honored. I did not nominate Paul, but his wife Patty did. I would have, but Patty beat me to it, and she wrote a really nice nomination letter, and I'm gonna read from that, maybe add a little something myself. But if you build it, they will come, and that's an adage from the Field of Dreams that is very appropriate for what Paul has done. And it applies aptly to Paul's work at Scuppernong Springs Nature Trail in the southeastern Wisconsin Kettle Moraine. His belief in the importance of this spot and the energy and drive he brings to bear has brought much needed attention and resources for restoration to an important Wisconsin wetland gem. He is a rare force in the field of wetlands and wetland restoration in Wisconsin, as he is a volunteer and works tirelessly in singular focus in all seasons, rain or shine, sub-zero cold, and the extreme heat and humidity of summer. He's out there and never gives up, giving back to nature. And I just want to maybe say what my first experience with Paul was like. And I met him about 5 years ago in fire training class. And when it was all over, he invited me out to the Scuppernong Springs Nature Trail to burn some brush piles. And we met up early in the morning and loaded our sleds with all the necessary gear and headed out to the brush piles. It was winter time and it was very cold. And the trail would take us a long way over the sand prairie and back down to the Indian Springs where the piles laid. But I was excited to be there. I had been dreaming about this kind of work since I started clearing the old horse pasture at home and taking horticulture classes and landscaping classes at Blackhawk. I thought I had arrived. Then we got about halfway there and the sled began to get heavy. My feet started to slip. My heart was pounding and I started to wonder if I was going to make it. But we just kept going, the way Paul Mozina does. We burned about 50 nice-sized brush piles into the evening that day. As the sun set and the fires burned down and settled into big glowing red balls, we hiked back up the sand prairie and gazed out west into the mesmerizing vista. You talk about citizens caring for, appreciating, and interacting with the natural resources. That was like interactive landscape art, a senseless act of beauty, like most days that Paul is at the Springs. Yeah. He's a rare force in the field of, I said that. Paul, and he does this without any expectation of compensation. His supernatural energy, commitment, and drive for wetlands restoration cuts through bureaucratic hang-ups and monetary constraints, as his dedication and advocacy for healthy wetlands draws in many stakeholders from a variety of land and wildlife organizations, as well as individual efforts to join in to get her done. His latest project at the Scuppernong Springs Nature Trail in the southeastern Kettle Moraine is a shining example of what one person can accomplish when passion and hard work unite. With minimal supervision from the DNR and the Kettle Moraine Natural History Association, Paul and his team of volunteers are working to transform a degraded Class 5 trout stream into a healthy native trout habitat. There's still a lot of work to do, and Paul is that kind of leader that can bring the appropriate manpower to bear to get real change made at one of the state's hidden gems. Not only is he a trusted worker in the field, Paul creates value, educating every single person that walks on that trail about invasive species, the importance of a restored landscape, and the healing quality of wetlands for all the creatures that are part of its domain. Paul creates value by being a good team player and mentoring the many volunteers that pass through this area. On several occasions, his mentoring and project leadership have spurred several volunteers to careers in natural resources. I must say that with Paul's help, I obtained an ISA arborist certification and landed a job in the tree care industry. And then I borrowed his model of volunteerism and adapted my own state natural area. And Paul has already been there and helped me get it done there. So it just keeps moving on. And I also wanted to say that I think that he evolved as a volunteer sort of out of the Lapham Peak, Mike Ford and Marlon Johnson School of Volunteerism. If anybody's familiar with Lapham Peak and the work that's been done out there, that's also in the Kettle Moraine Forest. But he cut his teeth with those guys and went to the Heartland Marsh and was very involved there, and then on to the Ice Age Trail Alliance and Brady's Rock, another Kettle Moraine Forest site. And then just last Tuesday, Paul and I have been working on a private property, and we joined two others that came from that same volunteering school, and it made me realize I have become part of a culture of land care here in Wisconsin that's strongly perpetuated by Paul Mosina and made possible in no small part by the Wisconsin Wetlands Association. So that felt good. And not only is he a tireless, dedicated, trusted worker in the field, spending thousands of hours over the years to restore habitat, and a tireless educator about this wetlands resource, he's a good writer, documenting the restoration process in his online field journal, the ScuppernongSpringsNatureTrail.com. The Field Notes blog serves as a unique voice in support of our natural resources and serves to inspire individuals and groups to act to do the right thing. His leadership, drive to open up landscape hidden by invasive buckthorn and honeysuckle, his love for freshwater springs, his supernatural energy and drive, and his compassionate spirit for the natural world are just a few of the reasons why he is deserving of recognition that an award like this brings. What an opportunity to give a small amount of recognition to a person who provides a huge amount of heart and the on-the-ground results in defense of Wisconsin wetlands. And that's all I have to say.
Come on up, Paul. All your award winners, after the celebration, meet up front. We're going to get more formal photos of you. And Paul's parents are here. Raise your hand.
Yes.
Podium's yours.
I was really nervous about making this speech, so I hope you don't mind. I pre-recorded it on my phone. I thought it would sound a lot better. My ideas would sound a lot better coming from a smartphone. Here, let me see if I can bring it up. Forget it. I'll just have to wing it. But thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And he's the sweetest soul you could ever meet in your life, and I appreciate his friendship. And I do want to thank my wife, Patty Holman, for nominating me. And it's a shame she couldn't be here tonight. It's my fault that she's not here tonight. She wanted to be here, and she's in Oregon instead. And we'll just have to see how that works out. But I'd also want to thank other people that have helped me in my course. And Lindsay mentioned the Ice Age Trail, and that's how I got started in land conservation back in 1996 approximately. And I met Ken Knightsky and Stacy Balsley, who were the leaders of the Waukesha chapter of the Ice Age Trail at that time. And I started mowing the trail and taking care of the trail, and I really loved that. And in 2000, Marlon Johnson, who was a retired biology professor from University of Waukesha, organized a work day out at the Heartland Marsh, which is a part of the Ice Age Trail property. And I learned how to use a chainsaw there in 2000, and that was really letting Pandora out of the box or something. You know, I really enjoyed the chainsaw. You know, rather than taking a lopper and just lopping off of a branch, I was able to strike at the root. And I also, as Lindsay mentioned, followed the example of Mike Ford and Mike and Yvonne Ford, who are the leaders of the Friends of Lapham Peak, and they've done tremendous work there. So I want to thank those people for inspiring me to do this kind of work. And I also want to mention the Kettle Moraine Natural History Association. They have funded my efforts for the last 5 years. They pay for my equipment and my transportation, and I really appreciate that subsidy. And I've also had the pleasure of working with the Southeast Wisconsin Trout Unlimited group, and they've come out to the Scuppernong Springs for the last 5 or 6 years. They come out once or twice a year and do projects. We're trying to restore the sinuosity of the river, if you know what I mean. And lastly, I'd like to thank the DNR. Paul Sangren passed away last year. He was the superintendent, and Ann Corman, his replacement, and Don Dane, the burn boss, the trail boss, and Ben Heuser and Steve Gospoderic from the fisheries team, and Craig Halker and Rachel Saber from the water quality team. It's really been a pleasure to work with those people. They've taken me under their wing and taught me a lot about wetlands and how to take care of them. So Tracy mentioned that in 2012 I heard about the Wisconsin Wetlands somehow and reached out to Tracy, and he got back to me right away, and we had a really wonderful day at the Scuppernong Springs in August of 2012, and Connie and Lindsay were there that day, and Sophia, Connie's niece. We had a great time, and Tracy, I captured an interview with Tracy, and I listened to it today, and it's really great, talking about what the Wisconsin Wetlands Association is all about. And I'm a voluntarist, but at heart, I believe in that voluntary action is the way for society to cooperatively achieve its goals, and so that makes me really proud to be a recipient of the Wisconsin Wetlands Association Award, because the volunteerism is at the heart of that organization, which, started back in 1969 in the Dane County area, and all volunteer effort over many, many years, thousands and thousands of hours and dollars collected. The board of directors is outstanding for the Wisconsin Wetlands. The leadership they provide is just outstanding, and the staff that they put together is just fantastic. And they do education. They create educational material. They coordinate science, and they present the science and the information to community leaders, from land trusts to legislatures, and they've been very instrumental at championing wetlands in the state of Wisconsin for almost 50 years now. And how about a nice round of applause for the Wisconsin Wetlands Association? Yeah. So anyways, you might, I hope I don't drag on too long here, but my nickname is the Buckthorn Man, and I was working at the Scuppernong Springs one cold winter day, and two families came walking by, and one of the mothers said, "Oh, there's the Buckthorn Man." And I thought that stuck with me. I said, "Yeah, I am the Buckthorn Man." And so I started, as I mentioned, at the Ice Age Trail in '96. I learned how to use a chainsaw, and I spent about 4 years working at Brady's Rocks, which is on the Ice Age Trail south of the Scuppernong Springs, and that was just a wonderful opportunity to be a landscape architect. And Lindsay mentioned the artistry of it, and when you can expose the vistas and from a trail, and what was previously a wall of buckthorn is now an open expanse into a wetland and a prairie, it's just a thrill. I thank the Creator many, many times for the opportunity to be out there doing that work. It meant so much to me. And then in about 2005, I spent about 9 months working at the Scuppernong Springs, and I really loved it. But I somehow was attracted to go back to the Heartland Marsh. The Bark River flows through Heartland. It's halfway between Delafield and Heartland, if you can imagine that neck of the woods. And I spent about 6 years working at the Heartland Marsh. It was about 180 acres with about 50 acres of upland with buckthorn thickets on it. And beautiful, beautiful oak trees, the biggest oak trees you're going to see in southeastern Wisconsin, completely enclosed by buckthorn. And so every day I went out to work, it was just a joy and a treasure. I felt like I was getting the opportunity put in my lap to make this change. So I went after it with a passion. And about 2011, I kind of ran afoul of the village of Heartland, and I just got frustrated with that project, and I contacted Paul Sangren at the South Kellamrain and Ron Karowski, the naturalist, and I said, can I come back to the Springs? And they said, sure. Oh, I guess I should get right on the mic there. They said, sure, come on back to the Springs. And so I began working in earnest back at the Scuppernong Springs as much as I could. I retired from my job. I just said, I don't care about money anymore. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I got cancer in my neck. My life was, I was coming apart. I had too much stress in my life. I quit my job, I quit drinking, quit smoking cigarettes, and cleaned up my act, and just dedicated myself to working at the Scuppernong Springs. And it's been a joy, and we've done a lot of things out there. If you know the area, it was developed as a trout farm back in 1872. I hope I'm not going too long here. Just give me another minute. And when they made the trout pond, the trout farm, they bisected the river with 5 different embankments. They split up the headwaters. We're talking about pristine springs that they buried the springs under raceways and built up that whole area and put all these embankments in and all this infrastructure. And when they abandoned the trout pond, like the 1890s or something, they left 2 big ponds, and those ponds covered the headwaters of the Scuppernong River and all the springs. And it remained that way for almost 120 years until 1991 or 92, when the DNR finally opened up the embankments and released the water out of those ponds. And then all the invasive species came in, the phragmites and the cattails, and filled in that area. And all the sediment that had been in that pond settled in the river. And the sinuosity, the river was kind of obliterated almost. And it remained like that for since '92. And then but when I got involved with it there, the people that were helping me, Ron Krosky, said, you got to pull that watercress out. And we began, Lindsay helped me and Ben Johnson, we began working in the river, trying to get rid of the invasive species. And one of the things we noticed was that I was pulling watercress one day, and I found some wood under there. And what did I discover was at the very headwaters of the springs, the very first great bubbling springs, they had put in a raceway for the trout pond. They had literally put in 18-foot long oak beams across the river and laid decking on it, covering up the springs under decking. And it was like that for 120 years. And we got a jetter pump from the DNR. Don't tell anybody. Was not permitted. And Ben Johnson helped me, and we blasted those oak beams out of there and pulled up all those deck boards. And under the deck boards were bubbling springs that had been hidden under decking for 120 years. And I can't describe to you what joy that was to reveal that spring. When I'm by springs, I feel like I've just got my finger on the pulse of the Creator. I can feel it, and it means so much to me. So it was really a thrill. And then we asked the DNR to come in and do an elevation survey of the river course in that stretch of the river, and we found out that at each of these embankments it was still a roadblock. There was muck piled up behind each one of these embankments because they hadn't gone down deep enough. And over the last 3 years, we've opened up all those. We've excavated those embankments down to the original riverbed, so the river is running at its full strength. There's no more impediments. All the muck is finally washing out of there, and we're starting to see the creation of little pools and the runs and riffles and the overhangs and all the trout habitat, and the trout population out there is doing great. And so, anyways, I will let the next group come up. And I just wanted to say thank you again to the Wisconsin Wetlands Association, and they're doing great work, and I really appreciate this recognition.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, literally, he could have talked all night. That's like this much of what he's done out there. And the thing that's so great is how the volunteerism is expanding now because of your efforts. It's so inspiring to see. So thanks so much, Paul. Next up.